Welcome back. Now get in here or else. Get on the chair and sit your ass down. Great. Now let's continue the war. All right. In the last video, I said that Gustavo here won 2 battles in a row. He won the first battle by a landslide, as the Catholic army was still using outdated tactics and strategies. They were f***ed by the Protestants, and it was a huge success for Gustavo and his men. And luckily, someone had time to paint this sexy portrait of him during the fight. You're probably thinking, is this a bit gay? Yes, it is. I changed the topic. Oh, by the way, a Catholic general called Albrecht von Wallenstein was getting really frustrated he kept losing to stupid, sexy Gustavo. What he wanted more than anything was for Gustavo to be killed. But his prayers would be answered, because in the next battle, Gustavo would indeed die.
Stop using fancy words.
Indeed isn't fancy, asshole. Anyways, let's break down the details of this battle. Gustavo and Wallenstein's troops stayed at either sides of the town of Lutzen, both teams waiting for the other one to strike. Eventually, Gustavo charged first, but the fog was so thick that day people were blindly shooting their own teammates. And since no one could see anything, people were running face first into walls and smacking into barbed wire fences. Being the reckless guy he is, Gustavo and his men rode into the battlefield. But that was a dumb mistake, because since it was so damn foggy, Gustavo got separated from his main force and then was caught in the back with a thrown knife, making him fall off his horse. The stab wound was pretty thick and he was clearly on his way out, and so the Catholics came and made death less painful for him. Oh, what a bunch of nice guys. The Protestants were pissed that their leader was shot dead, and so they fought fiercely, and after a few hours, Wallenstein withdrawed his troops. This should have been a victory for the Protestants, but it was more of a bittersweet one due to Gustavo dying. Oh, and by the way, France joined the war. You'd think, being Catholic and all, they would side with the Habsburgs during the war, right? Wrong. They sided with the Protestants mostly because they hated Ferdinand II. Well, that makes 2 of us. The minister of France named Cardinal Richelieu was an evil trickster that played his enemies and was a key part in the later stages of the war. By the way, Ferdinand was bored of Wallenstein, so he gave him the boot, but then later he was hired again. But 2 years later, Ferdinand decided he was too much of a threat, so he hired 2 hitmen to go kill Wallenstein. Meanwhile, up in northern Germany, the Swedes, still mourning from the loss of Gustavo, were having a bit of a tough time. They were being chased across the German peninsula by the Habsburgs, basically running for their lives. They knew they couldn't run forever, so they pretended to be panickingly retreating, but they actually did a 180 and headed back. The Habsburgs were caught completely off guard by the sudden attack, so they weren't at their best. Eventually, they retreated, and that gave the Swedes a much-needed victory to boost their morale. 2 years later, the Swedes met the Habsburgs again at the town of Rheinfelden. This time, the French are with them. The armies camped at either side of the Rhine River, which for our purposes is like a big watery obstacle. On one side of the river are the Habsburgs, and they were led by a bloke called Federico Savelli, whose name sounds like a fancy pasta dish. The other side's general decided that the proper thing to do was march down the river and give Savelli's forces a good old-fashioned beatdown. That night, the Protestants got in boats and swam in the darkness, trying not to get spotted by the enemy. Despite the challenges of the river crossing, the Protestants managed to get across undetected. They then launched a surprise attack on Savelli's unsuspecting army. It was like crashing a party, but instead of bringing a bottle of wine, they brought swords and muskets. The Habsburgs were completely unprepared for this, and imagine being sound asleep in your tent and suddenly being woken up by a bunch of yelling soldiers wielding pointy objects. Not a pleasant way to start the day. Then Savelli was captured, and immediately after their general was taken prisoner, the Habsburgs surrendered. The Protestants were on a roll, and they kept kicking Catholic ass through the final few years of the war. After a decade of stalemate, killing, and bloodshed, both sides met up and were like,
"Do you even remember what we were fighting about in the first place?" Nope.
And with that, the Peace Treaty of Westphalia was signed, ending the 30 Years' War. Europe was united again. The official power was balanced again. Tom Selleck shaved his mustache again. It was all peace. Well, actually, not exactly. Remember the Minister of France, Cardinal Richelieu? Well, during the war, he got himself into a conflict with Spain, and tensions between those 2 countries heated up. And even as the 30 Years' War ended, the Franco-Spanish War was still raging on. You want details? Well, I ain't giving you them today. I need a break. Farewell, my friend. We shall meet soon again. For now, though, I have some important business to conduct.
What are you working on? Oh, just trying to make some sense of these numbers. What did you hit? What happened to my spreadsheet?
Okay, so maybe it wasn't important business. Anyways, goodbye.
Hey, bro, watch your jet. Watch your jet, bro. Watch your jet!